Meanwhile, another mayor of the news, Mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, he has sued the federal government today over its sanctuary city crackdown.
Chicago may be the first to bring a lawsuit, but I'm also confident we will not be the last, because other cities know that these are false choices that the Trump Justice Department is asking us to make.
And the Justice Department's fired back at Mayor Emanuel in the following statement. In 2016, more Chicagoans were murdered than in New York City and Los Angeles combined. So it's especially tragic, they say, that the mayor's less concerned with that staggering figure than he is spending time and taxpayer money protecting criminal aliens and putting Chicago's law enforcement at greater risk. So with that, let's talk about it. The GOP consultant, Gianna Caldwell, is here with us today. Former Obama 08 staffer Andrew Feldman is also with us. Andrew, you in a moment, but let me start with Gianna. I know you're out in, I believe you're out in L.A. today, but you're a Chicago guy.
I'm in L.A. It's sunny.
You're a Chicago guy, though, right?
Yes, I am.
And tell me about your city
Very
and what
much
you
so.
think of your mayor with this, the mayor of your hometown with this lawsuit.
Well, let me say something that I think all three of us can agree on. Rahm Emanuel is a failed mayor, so I'm sure there's going to be no fight.
Not going to agree on that, Gianna. I'm not going to agree on that.
Andrew doesn't.
I'm sure
we've had
that
Andrew. He's not going to let you. He's not going to give you an inch on anything.
So
but that's it. But this lawsuit specifically with the sanctuary cities.
Yeah, but so he's a failed mayor. But with this lawsuit, I think this is disingenuous because Chicago's mayor is using sanctuary cities, the people of Chicago, as a pawn. It's a political fight, one in which he continues to lose. He has no record of accomplishments in Chicago in terms of bettering the city, pushing it forward. When you look at every benchmark that determines what's a good mayor, he gets an F. In addition to that, the violence in Chicago is completely out of hand. During Memorial Day weekend, my younger brother, in the car with two of his friends, or on the south side of Chicago, when two individuals walked up to the car and riddled it with 25 bullets. Wow. And thankfully, my little brother lived. His best friend died in his arms, and it's a horrible situation. And that makes me even more alarmed that Rahm Emanuel is not focusing on the residents' safety versus protecting people that are potentially criminals. Not everyone, obviously, but there's obviously some criminals in Chicago that he's protecting.
Well, let me ask Andrew about this in the following way. I think this, if you try to simplify, as we look at some of the numbers in Chicago, and they are quite staggering, some of these murder numbers and just violence numbers overall. But, Andrew, if you look at the argument that Democrats, whether it's Rahm Emanuel or anybody else, has to make on this, I can see why it's tough for them, because they generally, you know, they have to come in and say, here's the reason that I'm not going to cooperate with the federal law. I mean, they have to make that case, right? And people say, well, why? Why aren't you cooperating with what the law states? So how do you respond to that?
It is terrible what's going on with crime in Chicago. And I'm sorry to hear what Gianno's brother went through this past Memorial Day. But that does not make this sanctuary city effort by Trump and the laws that he's putting forth to be right. And this is a courageous act by Rahm Emanuel. Why? Because this is let me make my point, Gianna. Let me make my point.
Okay.
This is a courageous act.
Please go ahead.
Why? Because when you look at constitutional law, the law is on Rahm Emanuel's side. He is not allowed, the federal government is not allowed to coerce him into, you know, following these policies. That's what happened with the ACA and Medicaid and Medicare. They had to make that choice for themselves.
That's all going to get worked out. Hold on one second, guys. It's all going to get worked out in the courts, right? That whole part is going to get worked out in the courts.
We are going, that's fine.
No, but Andrew, that didn't answer the question of how do you defend that argument?
I'm going to defend the question because instead of focusing on how to reduce crime, instead of focusing on that, we are saying, okay, the federal government's going to give us less money. That's not fair.
Okay, fine.
We should be focusing on how to reduce that number, and that's not by taking away federal money.
Go ahead, Gianna.
Andrew, it's so interesting. I thought you were going to come on with your coffee talking points, not your happy hour talking points. So now that you've chosen to go by way of your happy hour talking points, let me respond to this quote-unquote courageous act by Rahm Emanuel, which I think is blatantly false. I think for us to talk about the federal government somehow pushing Rahm Emanuel in this way, when pushing him in this direction, it's called the stick and carrot approach. It's where the federal government may have grant funding for a particular locality that's available, but if you don't do X, Y, Z, then you cannot apply for that money. That's not coercion, as you put it.
Okay.
And Rahm Emanuel is in this way a gracious individual. He's failing the people of Chicago on multiple fronts, especially the black community in Chicago. If you're an African American man between the ages of 18 and 24 in Chicago,
is failing the black community.
Andrew, 1 second. Just let him finish this. Finish real quick, Gianna. 1 second, then we have about 30 seconds for you to respond. But go ahead, Gianna, real quick.
If you're an African American man between the ages of 18 and 24 in Chicago, 47% of you are unemployed or out of school. Rahm Emanuel should be focusing on those issues instead of trying to protect folks who shouldn't be here anyway.
All right, we got to go in a second, Andrew. Just it's going to have to be quick.
The Trump administration is failing blacks and minorities in Chicago. They're taking away resources that could be used for the local police to protect the streets. And you know what? You know what? We're also, focused on taking away the American values. American values, Americans came here for the opportunity, and Rahm Emanuel's trying to protect
Got to go on that note, but I still think it's a tough one for the Democrats to argue on this particular issue, just because of how it comes across, if for no other reason. Gianno, Andrew, thanks to both of you.